I would like to welcome today. This is the final of our Science, Ancient Wisdom and Theosophy investigation series, and it is a great honour for us to welcome Dr. Jude Currivan today.
Thank you, Renee. Thank you, everyone. It's so great to be not just with my New Zealand friends, but again around the world. And we were just chatting, Renee and I were just chatting before we started on the theme and the saying of Theosophy: there is no religion higher than truth. And what I'm finding incredible is that now we have leading edge science, and it's offering us evidence-based realization, discoveries, and truth that are absolutely congruent with theosophical teachings and numerous ancient wisdom teachings. So what I'd like to share today is what that leading edge science is showing us. But I want to keep coming back to the realization that thousands of years ago, mystics, seers, sages realized that this was the existential truth of the nature of reality. Okay, and start with a presentation. And I'm calling this an emergent whole world view, because our worldviews, our beliefs about the nature of reality generally drive our behaviors. They guide our choices, our decisions, and so our behaviors. And we've had a situation until most recently, certainly in our secular societies, of a mainstream science of essentially separation, a universe that doesn't have, innate meaning or purpose. And so we have collectively bought into that in the way we educate our children, the way we organize ourselves, the way we govern, our healthcare. All of it is driven from an incredibly fragmented worldview based on a secular science of separation and solely materialism. And what I'm about to share now is the leading edge science and the scientific breakthroughs that are turning that completely on its head and actually coming much, much more convergent with universal wisdom teachings, and of course, including theosophy. So let's take a step back. Until the 16th, 17th century, there really wasn't any perceived scientific methodology for investigating the nature of reality, although, as I say, for many thousands of years, ancient understanding had told us that in the Indian tradition, the rishis of ancient India told us that all is consciousness. The ancient Egyptian teachings and the Greek teachings told us that the whole world is resonant and essentially geometric in its relationships. But until the 16th century, there'd been no experimental perspective on trying to understand the nature of reality. And that's where early natural philosophers such as Newton came in and made incredible discoveries. For example, Newton showed by understanding gravity as he did, that what happened here on Earth also kept the planets in their orbits around our sun. So for the first time, in that sense, heaven and earth were connected through that understanding of the nature of gravity. But nonetheless, it was a universe of things and essentially of separation. And then about 100 years ago, that changed because certain phenomena couldn't fit into that wholly mechanistic worldview. And so we had the revolutionary understanding of quantum physics and of relativity. And quantum physics basically telling us that, an observer and what is observed cannot be separated. And also that there was a certain probability to reality rather than determinism. And relativity was showing us that space and time were each of them relative to an observer, yet when they were combined together as space-time, that helped the universe to be understood at a deeper level as something that was more connected. Nonetheless, the deeper perspectives of those two revolutionary understandings were kept to the side, and that revolutionary understanding that was kept to the side was still the nature of consciousness itself. And mind and consciousness were peripheralized. And so for the next 100 years or so, that has pretty much continued to be the case. It's only now where, again, phenomena cannot be understood in this prevailing 20th century understanding, and where quantum physics and relativity physics still have not been able to be combined in an overall understanding of our universe with that prevailing perspective, that new discoveries, new understanding, deeper understanding, and fundamentally now bringing mind and consciousness back to the very fundamental nature of reality is taking us forward. Because what we're now discovering is a universe that is fundamentally not just interconnected, but ultimately unified. So scientific breakthroughs are now, and literally over the last 5, 10, 15 years, and to this day, are showing at all scales, and the evidence is showing, that is enabling a unitive perspective of how our universe arises, emerges from deeper non-physical causation and causative realms of unitive reality. Whilst quantum physics and relativity physics, as I mentioned, gave us the clues to this, it's only now possible by understanding the role, the crucial role of information and the holographic principle, that we're able now to step into a much more fundamental perspective of the nature of reality itself. And this new understanding, which of course is the theosophical understanding, it's the understanding of the ancient rishis of India, the adepts of Greece, and of China and of Egypt and of many other traditions, and of course indigenous traditions too, that it's based, the reality is based on the primacy of mind and consciousness. It's now showing us that cosmic mind, what Einstein called cosmic mind, the infinite and eternal ground of all being, articulated as digitized and vitally meaningful, not random data, but meaningful information, and represented through relational patterns and processes, literally informs the formation of our entire universe. We've known for a very long time that physical reality, as physicists, we've known for a very long time. I'm not saying everybody's known this for a very long time, but physicists have known for a very long time that what we call physical reality is extremely ephemeral. Here we have 99 there are 12 nines after that decimal point, percent no thingness. And when we drill down to that absolute fundamental scale of what we call physical reality, we find fields of informational influence. And so what we call the energy matter of our universe and the space-time of our universe are emergent phenomena of digitized information that arises from those deeper levels of causative intention. The 2012 experiment demonstrated that information literally is as physical as anything else we term so. So all the energy, all the matter, heat, work, forces, digitized information is as physical as anything that we've hitherto referred to as physical. And they did that by deleting a digitized bit of information that releases heat in accordance with theoretical predictions. And all this started then to hang together with other discoveries coming forward, because numerous fields of research are showing that such digitized information underpins and makes up the appearance of all we call physical reality. And when I refer to digitized information, it's the ones and the zeros, exactly the same ones and zeros that we use in our communications, our digitized communications. What we're discovering throughout many fields of research and at all scales of existence across science, this is the universal alphabet that combines as meaningful information to inform the reality of our universe. So in our English language, we have an alphabet made up of 26 letters from A to Z. Each of themselves doesn't hold meaning, but when we combine them in words and sentences, just as there are on this slide, we imbue them with meaning. Our universe, our entire universe, imbues the entirety of its meaning, from atoms to planets and plants and people, in a universal alphabet of 2 letters, ones and zeros, which again of themselves don't have intrinsic meaning. But when they're combined as energy matter, when they're combined as the leaves of a tree or a snowflake or a mountain or a person or a planet or a star, they have intrinsic meaning and relational meaning. And I note on this slide that our universe exists and evolves as a non-locally unified entity. That word non-local is fundamental, because when quantum physicists first came up with their discoveries 100 or more years ago, they realized that for quantum physics to work at all, our universe had to be what's called non-locally unified. In other words, it has to exist and evolve as a unified entity, and yet within its space-time, there is a limiting speed limit for any signal, which is called the speed of light. Otherwise, our universe couldn't evolve as it does. We couldn't be having this conversation as we are. E couldn't equal mc squared. None of the other discoveries of physics for the last 100 years could have worked out within space-time. And yet, our universe has to, and now we have the evidence that I'm going to show, has to exist as a non-locally unified entity also. It's the and, it's not an either or. So evidence at all scales of existence is showing that our universe also manifests holographically. It doesn't mean it's not real. It's just that the holographic principle is the way in which cosmic mind, the genius that creates our universe, does so holographically. So what we call the 3D-ness of space, the up, down, the forwards and backwards, the side to side 3D appearance of our universe, we're finding, and there's a great deal of evidence to show this, not just at cosmological scales, but every scale downwards, is projected from digital information. And I keep using that hyphen here because whenever I use the hyphen, what I'm referring to is meaningful information held on its containing two-dimensional boundary, a 2D boundary of space, time, and pixelated just as our technologies are pixelated, but this time at the minute Planck scale. Our high definition technologies, our high definition holograms, however wonderful they may appear to be, the pixelation of our universal hologram, our cosmic hologram of a universe, is pixelated at a scale 1 trillion times smaller than our best high definition holograms. And that's what the Planck scale is about. And that Planck scale is as small as to an atom as an atom is to the entire universe. The hologram, one of the key signatures in terms of patterns of a hologram and the cosmic hologram of our universe, are so-called fractal patterns. And these are basically geometric relational patterns. But unlike the idealized geometries of, say, a triangle. These fractal patterns show up everywhere, from atoms to clouds and coastlines on our planetary home, onwards and onwards, I'll come back to in a little while. But the fractal signature, and if you Google fractal, which I really invite you to do, you'll see some beautiful representations of fractal patterns from leaves and trees, snowflakes, and onwards and upwards and downwards, because the point about fractal patterns is they scale up and they scale down. And that is also key to holograms and the holographic signature of the cosmic hologram of our universe. And this signature of the cosmic hologram was seen in 2017. What you're seeing on this slide is a full all-space universal image of what's called the cosmic microwave background. And this is relic radiation left over from the very earliest epoch of our universe, around 380,000 years after our universe began. And this covers now the whole of space. But what you're seeing, these tiny color differences, are minute temperature differences that fill the whole of space. And when you analyze these, they are fractal in their signature, they are fractal in their patterning. So what we see is our informed universe showing itself in such universal patterns and processes throughout not just the natural world, what we might refer to as the natural world, but in human systems and behaviors too. And all of these patterns, you see on the one side of this slide, you see a pattern in sort of gold, yellowy gold, that almost looks as though it's the figure 8 repeated and repeated and repeated and repeated. And it's called the Lorentz attractor. And that embodies millions on millions of informational points. And the patterning is the actual pattern that underlies our weather systems. So all our weather systems, the appearance of our weather emerges from this underlying causative patterns called this attractor, this Lorentz attractor. And what you're seeing here is a weather pattern that is relatively stable, because such attractors hold within their boundaries a lot of differentiation and diversity. But within a stable system, they have these outer boundaries that you see here. It's only when a system is destabilized that the attractor breaks down. But in breaking down, what often happens, and this has been the story of the biological evolution of the whole story of our planetary home Gaia's biosphere, is that then other patterns, other attractors begin to form that are even more complex. So there's a breakdown, and often there's an associated breakthrough to a higher level of complexity. I'm hoping we might come back to that in the Q&A after this presentation, because of what's happening now. But arising from these non-physical, causative, underlying informational attractors, the entirety of our whole universe emerges. And as I say, we find these same patterns from atoms to our planetary home, in coastlines, in mountain ranges, in cloud formations, in lightning strikes, to our solar system, to vast galactic clusters, as we saw on the previous slide, the whole of space. So we and our universe are innately relational, not just relational. This is the reality of our universe, and informational. We inform, whether we know it or not, and are informed by the whole of our universe, the great cosmic thought that is our universe. Mind and consciousness, just as the ancients told us, just as Theosophy has shown us, aren't something we have, but what we and the whole world are. We are inseparable from each other, Gaia, and the whole world. And yet, and this is really important, unity is not uniformity. the unity of our whole world and the multidimensionality of our whole world is wonderfully diverse and yet exists and evolves as a unified entity. In 2018, scientists at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, showed universal non-locality. I mean, we'd known this, as I mentioned earlier, was theoretically needed to happen and be the case for quantum physics to work at all. But that sort of understanding, again, was peripheralized for many, many years. And so the focus on quantum physics was about the technologies that quantum physics could bring forward, rather than the deeper implications of what this was telling us. But in 2018, those scientists at MIT were able to so-called, it's known as entanglement. It's basically where quantum entities are fundamentally non-locally connected, which means that when they're separated through space or time, they're still connected, but no signal moves between them within space-time. It goes back to this, this cosmic speed limit, this cosmic cop called the speed of light. And without that finite speed limit within space-time, none of our universe could exist and evolve as it does. And yet, such non-locality means that our universe as a whole does exist and evolve as a unified entity. And that means that non-local phenomena, such as intuition, such as telepathy, such as precognition and remote viewing, are natural phenomena and natural attributes of a universe that is conscious and non-locally connected. And what the guys were able to do was they were able to entangle photons of light in the lab with starlight from 600 light years away. But that wasn't enough for them. They went further and they were able to capture light coming through a telescope, but from a quasar, which is a very, very active, powerful galactic center, 12.2 billion light years away. That light left that quasar 12.2 billion years ago. Just think for that for a moment. Now, that is the scale of pretty much our entire universe. So the emergent, non-locally unified cosmology is of a multidimensional universe. And that naturally includes supernormal, not supernatural or paranormal, but supernormal. And when I was in New Zealand, on one of my trips, my dear friend, Dean Radin, from the Institute of Noetic Sciences, Dean has done some amazing work showing the naturalness of non-local phenomena. And he actually has written a book called Supernormal, which I thoroughly recommend. But these are natural phenomena and natural attributes of a multi-dimensional, unified, non-locally unified universe. So telepathy, remote viewing, intention. We are in a universe that, because of its way of unification and because of the way that its energy and matter are quantized, so they're like notes of music, and everything is vibrational. It means that essentially everything is also resonant and harmonic. So what we do with telepathy and remote viewing intention, we're setting up resonant, harmonic connectivity and correlation that enables us to have access to non-local information. And we're finding experimentally that heightened intensity, whether it's focused attention, which is very much the work of another dear friend of mine, Lynn McTaggart, with the intention experiment, emotional bonding, the work that's been done on the empathy between twins, powerful imagery and occurrence. Many researchers have shown this. These are real phenomena, and now we have an understanding of why they're natural. intuition. It's often called the GPS, often. I love it being called the GPS of the soul. And it's our innate superpower. If we trust and if we hear and listen and trust our intuition, it's literally a bodily distributed resonance, and not a knowing, not an intellectual knowing, but a bodily knowing, which is why we often say our gut knows, and our intuition literally attunes with that natural way to gain access information. Synchronicities. There's no way on any of these phenomena can be understood by the old paradigm of separation and materialism. But synchronicity, again, is another phenomenon which is non-local, here and now, without violating space-time causality. Presentiment and precognition. Again, some of the work that Dean's been involved with suggests that we do have access for a shortish period of time to gain information of what is crystallizing into the now of the present. And there's still much work looking at this, but it's rather looking like the past is the past within space-time. There is no violation of causality from the very beginning of our universe, 13.8 billion years ago until now. Although its memory is held through this understanding, just as the Akashic records of ancient India understood, the record of the whole story of our universe is there on the holographic boundary. As space has expanded and time has flowed, more and more information has been able to be holographically projected into what we call our universe and is held there. But now at the bow wave of the potentiality of our universe's future, there is a crystallization, there is potentiality that non-local attunement can access to some degree. Dean's work suggests a very short time frame for that clarity to come into our perception. But nonetheless, there is a perception, there is a perspective of our ability to have some level of presentiment of the possibility of what may then actually realize and manifest in the present moment. So naturalizing multidimensional and archetypal realities and communications and coherent group consciousness is all part of what I'm seeing now is our opportunity to consciously evolve and to let go of this old mistaken perception of material separation and move into an incredible universe of wholeness where we are cosmic, microcosmic co-creators of both its reality and its possibility. And when I talk about naturalizing such multidimensional and archetypal realities, as Renee mentioned, I've been walking between worlds ever since I was 4 years old. And I suspect that many of us already are engaging with and accessing and being guided by, in many cases, such multidimensional archetypal realities, angels, extraterrestrial beings, devic, elemental realms, communicating with Gaia as a sentient being, astrologers communicating with our entire solar system as a matrix of consciousness. As we naturalize this in a naturally embraced cosmology of a conscious and evolving universe, to welcome this into our lived experience. Our universe began, not in the implied chaos of a Big Bang, but literally now in an incredibly ordered and fine-tuned and ongoing, a first moment of an ongoing, what I refer to as a big breath, as the sages of India call the breath of Brahman, as the big breath, whereas space expands and time flows, our big breath embodies an evolutionary impulse to evolve from simplicity to complexity. And unlike the old paradigm of meaningless, a universe that is bereft of meaning and of inherent purpose, instead, a universe that is meaningful, meaningfully exists and purposely evolves, where we are microcosmic co-creators of its evolutionary impulse and with innate supernormal abilities. So for me and for many, many others at this time, it seems to me that this is our moment of choice. So what do we choose? What do we choose literally to remember? What do we choose now to co-create? Do we choose to consciously evolve or remain caught in the illusion? And it is an illusion of separation. And Gaia's continuing emergence now is embodied in collaborative and co-evolutionary relationships from the very beginning. And collaborative relationships are both sort of healthy competition and cooperation. And every time in Gaia's long story and the whole universe's 13.8 billion journey, where there's been evolution, where there's been the emergence of greater complexity, it's always involved cooperation. It's always, whether it's, single-celled bacteria that needed to cooperate to get nuclei within them and mitochondria to energize them. So that became a cooperative. Every cell is a cooperative. And then from single cell to multi-cell required cooperation. The emergence of organs and organelles within ever more complex biological entities required cooperation. Cooperation is vital to the evolution of ecosystems. And now cooperation is vital to our future and our conscious evolution, where we wake up from this illusion of separation to come together, to cooperate as a human family, and a family that is also part of Gaia's sentience and family is vital for her, our entire planetary home's evolutionary progress and purpose. If we don't make it, she may well go on without us. If we don't make it, though, the illusion of separation has caused us to inflict such harm to her that she herself will struggle to heal and move on. And my goodness me, when we tell the story of 13.8 billion years of a universal impulse to evolve, surely we owe it to ourselves to do our very best to be part of that evolutionary progress. And now we have the evidence. We've had it in wonderful spiritual and wisdom teachings for thousands of years, indigenous teachings for thousands of years. And finally, science is coming to the party. Finally, science is coming to say, yes, what you've been telling us for thousands of years, oh, by the way, is right. And what this is now doing, though, at this 11th hour and 59th minute, where we've come to this edge of catastrophe because of our misperception of the integral nature of reality, it's offering us the evidence basis for a new story, a new narrative, a unitive narrative for humanity to underpin and to frame our conscious evolution. I'm paraphrasing here Joseph Campbell, the great mythologist, the inspirer for Star Wars. But he said the only narrative that's going to be worth thinking about in the immediate future is one that's talking about the planet and all beings on it. This new yet ancient narrative will need to be grounded in widespread, not little pockets, but widespread collective, unitive consciousness, which includes a felt sense, not just an intellectual understanding, but an experiential and embodied sense of unity with all life, unity with the ineffable source of all being, and unity with the evolutionary flow of our entire universe and our planetary home. And to paraphrase Teilhard de Chardin, the great philosopher who wrote these words at the end of World War I, over a century ago, someday we shall harness the energies of love. And then for a second time in the history of the world, humanity will have discovered fire. I've been part of a group of people who've come up with some wording for a unitive narrative as part of the Evolutionary Leaders Circle. And it's now, you know, it's only been a few months since the words flowed through us, but it's now gaining traction at the United Nations with, you know, civil society more and more throughout the world. It's very young. It's like this baby of a new and unitive narrative. And yet it has the potential based, I think, on the unitive science that I've shared a little bit of today, to be an underpinning and a framing for us all to move forward. And its wording ends with, going on from Teilhard de Chardin, that someday is here and now. And as we wake up to the radical guide, and radical means root and branch, radical reality of a unitive narrative and a universe that exists and evolves as a non-locally unified entity, we'll also discover as a species, and I think for the first time, perhaps for the first time, who we really and truly are, and who we can evolve to become. And in 2017, the Cosmic Hologram came out, and that really, you know, set the scene and the underlying science that I've shared tonight. And the story of Gaia, the big breath, and the evolutionary journey of our conscious planet is coming in October 22. And these, I hope, serve our ability to come together. These are the science. This is the science, along with many, many, many thousands of other researchers, and a lot now of new books coming forward to share this understanding of unity in diversity. So I'll stop there and go back to Renee.
Thank you, Jude. Absolutely amazing. That was very inspiring. I have some questions straight off the bat before we even start, but let's start with our first one here. Tell me, first of all, has it been easy to navigate the scientific community with the ancient wisdom, traditions, and spirituality and theosophy? Like, navigating that territory in the past has been almost dangerous for someone who was a scientist. How have you found that navigation with what cutting edge stuff now?
Basically, I ignored it.
Sounds great. Sounds great.
When I was 4 years old, and I had my first experiences of multidimensional reality, my innate curiosity, I think most kids are incredibly curious. I was so curious. I just wanted to follow this yellow brick road wherever it led me, to Oz, wherever it led me. And it's been a lifelong journey. And I go back to, there is no religion higher than truth. So my lifelong journey has been a journey of curiosity to actually perceive the deeper truth, the deepest truth that I can perceive. And what I was being informed by throughout the whole of, you know, I'm 70 now, so it's 66 years and ongoing, is, you know, the truths of the ancient wisdom, the truths of indigenous teachers, the truths of science, which is always a work in progress, always a work in progress. But this, and this understanding is now coming together in such a convergent way, such a unity-based way now, that for me and for many, many others is this realization that it holds the deepest truth, perhaps, that we're able to collectively, perhaps, engage with at this time. And as we potentially move forward into this whole next chapter of our adventure as a human species, if in my view, we open ourselves up to this, then my goodness me, where is that curiosity going to take us as a species? And I hope it's going to take us into a realization that we truly are microcosmic co-creators of our universe's innate evolutionary impulse.
I mean, it sounds absolutely beautiful. When you speak of co-creators, that actually takes me back to HPB and that quote from The Voice of the Silence, where she says, help nature and work on with her, and nature will regard thee as one of her creators and make obeisance. I think, oh, yes, that's exactly, we're really being called to the table, aren't we, as individuals as well as the group, aren't we?
We are. And my sense is the more we can link up and lift up, not just within our own, what we might perceive as our communities, but as far and wide as possible. I mean, what I've really been encouraged by over the last couple of years is that willingness now to link up and lift up. So people will say, oh, no, we're going this way and we're going this way. And no. Link up and lift up together. Find, even when we agree to disagree, do so with civility, do it with open hearts. But there is so much more that joins us. This underpinning, the nature of reality itself underpins the truth that we are inseparable. And the level, having written the story of Gaia, or the story of Gaia writing me, we have less genetic variation within the nearly 8 billion people that's living currently on Gaia than a family of chimpanzees on a mountainside in Rwanda. That's the level of variability. It's to come together, to realize that, to come together in service to and with Gaia on her evolutionary impulse. I mean, I end the story of Gaia to say, perhaps we can wake up and remember we're Gaians. Gaians.
That's right. Actually, that reminded me as well, HPB, when she spoke of unity, she said it is radical. And you've made that point very clearly within the various evidence-based things that you shared, how radical that reality is, isn't it? Like, it's kind of mind-blowing in a way.
It is, but it is. But what I love is that, within the whole theosophical community, this is your credo. This is your understanding. What I'm really saying now is we can't just treat it anymore. Oh, isn't this interesting? This is our existential nature. And it is that moment of choice. It is this moment of choice. Do we step into it, not as an intellectual perception, but as a lived experience, as an embodied reality?
This is our theosophical time. I'm sure I really got that right through this series from all our guests, and particularly tonight, that came through very, very clear. And I find these times very exciting in terms of growth, but that also brings up, these are tough times as well. And you spoke of that breakthrough at a more universal level, but that happens at the individual level. We have that same experience before there is breakthrough often, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And, going back to the attractors, one of the things I write about in the Cosmic Hologram, is about attractors underpinning everything we call reality. So when we look at the incidence of earthquakes, we look at many, many hundreds of earthquakes. For ages, people was trying to find what's an average earthquake. but they realized that there isn't such a thing as an average earthquake. If you plot on a graph earthquakes in terms of their frequency and their destructive power on a logarithmic scale, and that's another little clue to that it's holographic, you get a straight line. So in other words, all the earthquakes, whether incredibly powerful or small, cluster along a straight line, which says that all earthquakes are related. And the only difference is that an earthquake that is twice as powerful is 4 times less likely to happen. That's it. So huge earthquakes are not atypical. They're just part of this line that is the same relationship. Now, when researchers analyze human conflicts, from the scale of world wars to the scale of very small conflicts, and plotted them on a graph, frequency against destructive power in terms of deaths, and again logarithmically, guess what? It was exactly the same line as for earthquakes. The same attractor underpins conflicts and earthquakes and many other. So if we can have an attractor for conflicts coming from our collective awareness, we can co-create an attractor for peace. That's the key. It's our collective awareness that then emerges into our collective behaviors. So if our collective awareness increases vibration, it evolves, then our behaviors evolve naturally.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting? Goodness me, you make those links, and just hearing about that line, and that, you know, you spoke earlier when you said we're not just connected, but we're unified. That actually shows that graph, that shows that very clearly, doesn't it?
It does. We know that, Renee, through everything. You know, we're literally finding these same patterns at every scale of our universal existence, and, you know, throughout human behaviors. You know, the way cities, there was a wonderful analysis made of the way that galaxies form in terms of the population density of stars, and cities form with the population densities of people. And guess what? They're the same.
No, I'm definitely not surprised there. I'm blown away, though, that it's all come into the field and it's opening up. And we have some big choices to make. Now, I'm going to jump into, I've got there's quite a few questions starting to build up, so I better start asking them. The first one that's in front of me here, now I've lost that. Here we go. How does the universal mind fit into this non-local principle?
It is, if you can think of a balloon, okay? Think of a balloon. When you blow a balloon up, yeah, the holographic principle is telling us that our universe is actually, all its information is held on what would be the surface of that balloon. So space expands and time flows as that balloon is blown up. Then there's a greater and greater boundary area that can hold more and more information. And that is so the balloon exists and evolves as a non-locally unified entity, okay? And all its information is then projected consciously into what we would see as the sort of the 3D-ness of the interior of the balloon. Now, within that 3D interior, which in our universe's case is space-time, nothing can travel faster than the speed of light. And that's really important, because otherwise our universe couldn't evolve through time, because time requires causality to flow. Yeah. And causality can only happen if there is a finite speed limit to the speed of light. And yet that whole balloon of our universe exists and evolves as a non-locally unified entity. So it's the and it's genius.
So it's going from within outward, isn't it? It's coming from within out.
But it's the universe. You know, the universe is essentially universe soul, where it's microcosmic, individuated,
Yeah.
curious, you know, things called human beings, you know, and we are part of it, you know, with our multidimensionality. We are an intrinsic part of it. You know, we, in a sense, are cells within the body of the universe.
So in a way, we need to wake up to who we are is a very important part of this as a multi-level, multi-dimensional being, don't we? We need to understand there's not that limit that we often put on, you know, we put on ourselves. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, now let me see some more questions here. There's flowers in the chat, little emojis of flowers, standing ovation from Weiwei in Austria. Dear Jude, the ones and zeros that you mentioned, are they the same or similar to the, and she's got a dash and a dash signs, the yin yang? Thanks, Weiwei.
Yes, I mean, you know, the universal alphabet of ones and zeros is the simplest alphabet you could possibly have to differentiate. Yeah. And what we find is that, but then just as in our technologies, when you put long lines of ones and zeros, they make up your name or my name. They make up all the communications we have. For our universe, those universal ones and zeros make up atoms and plants and people and stars, make up the whole universe of meaning. All the energy, matter, and all the space-time are complementary expressions of that meaningful universal information. And of course, our ancient universal wisdom teachings understood this. You know, the hexagrams of the I Ching understood this.
Yeah.
The patternings that we see throughout our universe, for example, the Fibonacci patterns, again, are shown up. The relational patterns are founded on number and then relationships and geometry. There's a teachings of 4-level teachings of ancient understanding called the quadrivium. And what this is about is that geometry is number in space, music is number in time. Everything's foundational number, and our cosmology is a cosmology of number, because the ones and the zeros themselves can build to other numerical expressions. And those numerical expressions, in the sense of their relationships, can make up the Fibonacci relationships. And those relationships we see from DNA through on. So it's grounding it down and down and down. But the most fundamental is that universal alphabet of ones and zeros that then come through in all expressions at all scales of existence.
Thank you. And thank you, Weiwei, for that question. We've got Craig Whitelaw from Wellington. What type of energy would be able to travel faster than light?
Nothing in space-time. That's really important, Craig. No energy. I mean, I know there was a theoretical speculation that particles called tachyons could travel faster than the speed of light. In 100 years, we've never found any evidence whatsoever of that. And it was purely a speculation. But what we now know from what, you know, I pulled together and wrote about in the Cosmic Hologram and the story of Gaia, is if that were to happen, we wouldn't have a universe in the way we have it. Our universe would not exist and evolve as it does. You know, there is this cosmic speed limit within space-time, and it's there for a reason. I mean, what I always ask, and I've asked this, my curiosity, I've asked this for 66 years, is not how, why? And what I've always found is when you ask the question why, the universe always has a very sensible answer as to why it is as simple as it is, but no simpler, in order to embody, to exist and evolve as a unified entity.
Tell me something. You must find when you yourself ask some of the why questions, the answers must come like that. You know, sometimes you hear the thing, oh, a book fell in my head when I was thinking about this and I was wondering why, and then the book fell. And the universe kind of co-conspirates to come forward and let you know your question, doesn't it? Do you find that with your explorations as well?
Oh, yes. Absolutely. And that's why I love synchronicities so much, because they are such incredible way showers. If you know, I'll often ask a question, why, and then some synchronicity will just come here to me. And that takes me down that answering way. And sometimes it's when I'm very quiet. I try and give myself some quiet time every day, sometimes just to be quiet. But often I'll sit quietly with a question. And find that that question comes more easily in that quiet time. So to nurture myself in that way, I'm personally, I really, it's vital for me at any rate. I think for most folks.
I think that's one of the things every human being, and, you know, it's not always possible, but if you can, there's an honoring that goes on, and you seem to be able to find something within if you allow that time. Now, I've got a question here from Phoebe Williams. I think Phoebe's from Brisbane, and there's flowers from Esther from Sunshine Coast. But Phoebe says, can you comment on Robert Temple's work? We had Robert on the first night that we were, the first in our series. He describes cosmic or spiritual intelligence like an enormous cloud of plasma, and he specifically spoke of that plasma. I don't know if you personally know that work, but I'll put that question there.
I don't know it in detail, but plasma is fundamental to our universe, because we talk about sort of atoms, yeah. And, you know, forming energy, matter, and all the rest of it. Well, something like 99% of our universe is plasma. And what we know from, you know, the existence of primordial electromagnetic fields throughout space, that both electric fields and magnetic fields are vital in terms of informational transfer and storage. So I don't know Robert's work in detail, but it makes eminent sense that within space-time, plasma is an absolute fundamental.
Oh, what's happened there? Hi, Jude, you're back. Plasma.
Okay, well, electromagnetic fields fill the whole of space-time. They're there from the beginning pretty much. And magnetic fields especially hold, they are great memory holders of information. And electric fields are wonderful transferers of information at every level. And so the vast majority of energy in our universe, energy matter in our universe, is not as atoms, it is as plasma.
Interesting. Yeah, I know Robert Temple, when he spoke of that, was exactly pretty well what you've said there with the plasma. Thank you. Arnie from India, thank you, Dr. Jude, for that lucid narrative on cosmogony. Word by word, you resonate with HPB as she expounds the Akashic records and the secret doctrine, the unity of all existence. And he goes on, thank you. Darren, sorry we missed at the 4-year-old, question mark. Thank you, Jude. Anything you want to share about that experience from when you were 4? Because obviously that was the first time kind of out of the blue, but when you're that young, you're open to these things, aren't you?
Absolutely. You hit it beautifully there. Yes, a discarnate light came into my room. I started to hear a voice, an inner voice. I started to have a conversation, and the rest is the story of my life. Because it is natural at that stage and at that age. And I never, funny enough, I never shared my experiences growing up with anyone incarnate, lots of discarnate communications, but nothing with human beings until I was well into adulthood. And it wasn't that I was afraid to do so. I mean, if I'd mentioned it to my mum, she would have been wonderfully supportive, but it just never occurred to me. I was having so much fun, and, you know, as I say, my curiosity was taking me down this journey, and so I was never shut down. I was never told, no, it's your imagination, no, it's nonsense. And by the time I was sharing it, I categorically knew that it was not nonsense. You know, I'd had so much wisdom granted and guided for me, and it was such a support to my well-being and life, and there was so much validation.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, that by then I think Jung was asked on his deathbed, did he believe in God? And he went, no. He said, I know God.
Oh, wow. That's true,
Because
isn't it? So you knew inside. It's kind of like, you know that you know, don't you? You're not.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, that's when you have that, when it's alive in your experience. Now, let's work through these few other questions here. Thank you, Darren, for that question. He said to say, thank you for the presentation. What do you think we can do as individuals? This is from Esther, in our groups too, in our meetings, to contribute to the healing of our planet? Example, act local, think global as mentors for the rest of society.
That's lovely, and that's a really vital question. And we've at Whole World View, we've sort of expanded on that sort of act local, think global. We say act local, feel global, think cosmic.
Wow, that's pretty cool. That's lovely. Thank you. How can we live more simply so that all may simply live?
Yeah.
Interesting.
It's a choice, both personal and collective, isn't it? I mean, you know, when I was younger, I loved buying clothes. I buy one piece a year now, if that. I'm wearing stuff that I wore 20 years ago, and it's perfectly fine. You know, it's such a, how you do it in your own life is personal to you. But I would just invite everybody to really just tune into that. How can I live more simply without being frugal or feeling I'm missing something? But what is it that I can do in my life that can, even if it makes a small difference? And how can I link up and lift up with others? I mean, for example, our local, we live in the edge of a village. My husband, Tony, when he and I go for walks, we always pick up litter. And twice a year, he organises the whole of our community into a collective litter pick.
Oh,
and it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. And, you know, he also organises folks in terms of clearing of footpaths and also providing sanctuaries for wildlife. Yeah, because that's his passion. He loves that. Other people have different passions. But when we hear, you know, listen to what makes our hearts sing, and that serves others in whatever way, then let's do that. Let's link up and lift up together and just do that.
That's the key, isn't it? And it's that empathetic choice that we're making. That sounds great. Thank you. Wendy here, thank you so much for your presentation. Could you comment on what effect our human-created digital footprint, such as the content of the internet, has on our entangled consciousness?
That's a really good and an important point. I mean, we talked about Teilhard de Chardin that I referred to earlier. He talked about the evolution of human consciousness together with planetary consciousness, coming to something called he called a noosphere. And you know, when I've been sort of writing, I've talked about how we've moved from a geosphere through others to a biosphere, and now we're in a technosphere. And as a technosphere, we might move towards what he referred to as noosphere. But for me, it's deeper than that, because the noosphere is a sort of planetary sentience, but it's mainly intelligence. So what I've written about in the story of Gaia is Gaia's Gaiasphere, which is her entire geosphere, her rocks, her waters, her hydrosphere, her atmosphere, her air, her biosphere, but also as an overall intelligence and sentience that is evolving as her Gaiasphere. And we are intrinsically of her Gaiasphere, which is why I describe ourselves as Gaians. And a friend of mine, Michael Lindfield, gave me that term a little while ago, but I think it's beautiful. And for me, evolving to be Gaians is actually our innate heritage.
It's
And
wonderful,
also,
isn't it? We have that opportunity that we can tune in to Mother Earth anytime, can't we?
yeah, yes. And the more that we do that, and of course the indigenous communities have always done that, you know, we can come together to you know, serve her and all her children. And in doing so, embody our evolutionary potential and her evolutionary impulse.
That's right. That's right. Thank you. Now, there's one last question before we start winding up. Ganesh from Auckland. She says, thank you, Dr. Jude. Is there a relationship between quantum entanglement and the speed of light?
Yes, it's the and, because quantum entanglement is an innate property of the whole world. It was just that it was discovered through quantum, at the quantum scale. But even when it was being discovered at the quantum scale, it was realized that the entire universe had to be entangled in that sense, non-locally entangled at its most fundamental level for our universe to exist and evolve as it does. And now, as I mentioned earlier, in 2018, a group at MIT were able to show that at cosmological scales in the lab, starlight from 600 light years away and 12.2 billion light years away, light from a quasar. Mm-hmm. And yeah, and this is really the and that is the non-local entirety of our universe. But within space-time, rather than being inside that balloon I mentioned earlier, there is a finite speed limit to any signal that passes, and that is the speed of light. So non-local entanglement, there's no signal to pass because there's no separation. When you don't have a separation, there's no signal to pass. And yet the appearance of our space-time, the appearance, not its fundamental reality, the appearance of space-time is of that perceived separation. It's not separate, but it is differentiated and diverse. But to make it all work, there needs to be a finite speed limit so that when I speak and Renee speaks, there's a signal that passes between us, and it passes between us at the speed of light within space-time. But if we're in telepathic connection, there's that deeper realization that we're not separate.
Yeah.
And so the telepathy doesn't have that space-time limitation to it.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. You've made everything very exciting. You express in a way that is understandable and brings you right to the edge. And we know our part to play within all of this. So I would like to thank you on behalf of everyone that's listening and on behalf of the Theosophical Society in New Zealand. I will just mention here that Jude, interestingly enough, she is speaking for the TS in the USA later today. But of course, she started with the first light in the world, down with Theosophy, and she will finish off in the USA. So please give my best to Barbara. I'm sure it'll be Barbara.
I will.
Yes, definitely pass on our best. And I'll just say to everyone here, this is the last in our series of the 6 Science, Ancient Wisdom Investigative Evenings. And all of our guests, from Professor Robert Temple, Jacques Monique from France, Dr. Eben Alexander, who spoke so highly of you, Jude, as well, Murray Centerford from here in Auckland, and Dr. Jude Currivan. They have all given their time for free and have just been part of this so willingly and enthusiastically. The TS in New Zealand is sending a little Kiwiana gift to everyone. So you'll receive that once they've, I think some of them have gone and some haven't. So that'll be in the next little while, a little thank you from all of us here. And it's been a wonderful series. And just to end on with you as our final speaker has been a real treat for us. So thank you, Jude, for being part of our world. And I'll be back in touch once we do the tape and we get it all up online.
Thank you, everyone. It's been, as always, a delight to be with my New Zealand friends and, of course, around the world. And I really just to finish, I really invite all the theosophical societies around the world to reach out beyond your communities, because you are the messengers. You can be the messengers of this deeper understanding for so many people.
Yeah, you put it in such a way that it's so relatable for people. So it's very, very helpful for us to have, because people come to our doors, and they're interested, and we need to be able to express it in a modern way that is relatable. So you certainly make that very possible. It's a great joy for us even to see it. So thank you, Jude, for being part of it.
Thanks,
All right.
Renee. Thank you, everyone. Lots of love.
You too. Thank you, everyone.